Hello, everyone.
Hey, hey. I'm in breakfast mode now, so I'll be camera off.
All right, hopefully my dogs are getting their barking out of the way now in the background.
Hello.
Hey, Jonathan.
John's keeping his dogs quiet. I'm inviting mine in, so they're included. It's all about inclusion, John. Come on. They're my best employees. They're in charge of morale.
I have to kick the cats out from meetings sometimes, otherwise they get far too chatty, the cats. They just want to talk to everyone. The other day, I think my cat realized that I was talking to someone on Zoom. Like his brain exploded. He was like staring at my screen, getting closer and closer. Like, wait a second. Are there more people in the world?
As a cat lover, you might appreciate that we have a neighbor that walks their cat on a leash, and the cat actually
Nice.
walks. It grew up with all dogs, so the cat thinks it's a dog. So it
We've
goes on
tried.
walks
Well,
with the
we've
dogs.
tried.
It's freaking hilarious.
I don't think Catherine's going to make this one as well. I remember she was going to be out for this one for office hours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for
Hello.
waiting. We're just gonna kick off because I'm already 3 minutes late. I hope everyone's doing good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world and watching this recording. I'm very honored to be here today with John and Jonathan, which we're gonna have kind of a fireside chat on neurodiversity. This does not mean that our participants cannot come in, chat about it as well. So if you have special gems or insights you'd like to share or chat about, please feel free to unmic, raise your hand, and so forth. And with that, I'm going to kick off with introductions. We're going to start off with John. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and then pass it over to Jonathan.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is John Shell. Even though it's spelled KJ, it's pronounced SH, which is not at all confusing. I'm the director of open source at TestifySec. I work with Matt, who's also here, but it's a startup, so the director title doesn't really mean a whole lot. I'm a maintainer for some sub-projects under Intoto in CNCF, Witness and Archivista. And I've worked with quite a few people in OpenSSF on the Salsa project, the security tool belt when that was around still, and a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, happy to be here today and chat. So I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Leitchu. You'll have to forgive me. I have a little bit of a cold. It just keeps on giving. It's this winter weather. Um, so my I'm a software security researcher, predominantly focused on open source. I found some stuff in some corporate software that is, I found a vulnerability in Zoom back in 2019. I got honored to be the first ever Dan Kaminsky Fellow. Um, uh, I was part of Alpha Omega, and I'm currently independent and in the market for a job. So, anybody who's looking to hire a software security researcher, hit me up.
All right, thanks for the introduction. Both come from a big, wide background, and neurodiversity is such a wide usually used term nowadays. So, Jonathan, we'll kick off with you first. So, what's neurodiversity? Like, what does it mean to you personally? And then, what are some misconceptions that you've seen you might want to clear up?
Interesting question. Um, so for me, I mean, at least I have ADHD. Um, but uh I think that it has a duality of it makes certain things significantly easier, it makes certain things significantly harder. Um, so something that, someone else might have, figured out how to do and has gotten down solidly. Just because, uh, something that I have tried to be able to achieve for a long period of time, and I've never been able to fully be able to get that skill down, even with trying. So, um, that's kind of been my experience of it personally. Uh, I think that there is likely a lot more neurodiversity out there than is diagnosed. But uh, yeah, I mean, it's a way in which we all bring our unique skill sets to the table and can contribute, but also need to be willing and able to ask for support from the people around us who have um, skills that can complement and support the things that we do not. Those of us that are neurodivergent are unable to or struggle with being able to do. I'll go ahead.
Yeah, so I think for me, just the name neurodiversity is thinking differently, right? People who think differently than neurotypical, and I have no idea how to find what is typical. That's an incredibly difficult thing. The you know, I'm sure there's some sort of very precise clinical definition of neurodivergent folks have been diagnosed with things like ADHD or autism spectrum disorder in some form. There's probably other things as well in there that I don't even know about or I'm forgetting. I think as far as the misconception, though, is really you can generalize any of those things, right? You can stereotype them. I was listening to a podcast the other day, specifically talking about ASD and ADHD, and the psychologist talking about it said if you meet one person with one of these things, you've met one person with one of these things, right? Like. Um, my wife and I were listening to a book on tape. It was ADHD and dirty laundry or something along those lines. And there were these stories that this couple were sharing about their experiences. One of them being neurotypical and the other having ADHD. And my wife kept saying to me, like, this doesn't sound like you. Like every example, every one of these stories, like, the person talking about forgetting their cell phone all the time, losing it. And she's like, you don't do that. And I'm like, no, but have you ever seen me spend a half hour looking for my water bottle? Because that's the one thing I carry around with me everywhere, and I set it down and I don't have a dedicated place for it. I wear the same pants every day for weeks on end, and I know that my wallet and my keys and my chapstick and the other things that I use every single day are there. I've had some sort of adaptation around that. And so at a high level, a lot of the patterns are similar, but their experiences can be very different. I think the other thing is that there is an incredible overlap with other things outside the scope of neurodiversity with people who have some sort of neurodiversity, specifically being anxiety and depression. And those things can amplify things and make them worse and make it more confusing to understand as someone going through that. So, yeah.
That's a
I'll
really
s-
good point. I think like a nice light bulb moment. You meet one divergent person, you've only met one. And I can totally relate with the cell phone thing. Like my cell phone, my laptop, I never have any idea where any of it is. Thankfully, I don't walk around constantly with my keys because that would be another missing item. But um, thank you both for sharing that. I do want to highlight, if we want to maybe share a personal journey surrounding neurodiversity and how it's affected you and your career in tech. John, we'll go over to you.
Yeah, so I was only officially diagnosed with ADHD about 3 years ago. And part of the reason for that was having an incredibly difficult time at work. Um, and sorry, Prince, I'm
Come
not
on,
sure
go
if
on
you can
mute. Yeah.
mute. Yeah. Um, the um, reason I started going was because of anxiety. Like I started going to a therapist and looking at medication and things like that. And as I started talking more and more about my experiences growing up, um, I did really well in high school. Once I left that structured environment of having a certain time to show up in the morning, having classes to go to, having homework that I couldn't put off for weeks or months at end because it was due the next day. I did really well in that environment. I went to college and I ended up going to 5 universities before I got a degree. Dropped out of a couple, transferred around to multiple different ones because that lack of structure was really hard. Then when I started in my career, I was single. I didn't have a family. I wasn't married yet. And I would do all of my work at night. I would do it from 8 o'clock at night until 2 or 3 in the morning, and I would be there in the office the rest of the time, but I couldn't ever get anything done besides talking to people. And so those different experiences all highlighted were symptoms of the diagnosis I eventually received. And then once I received that, you get this label, and it's this question of like, well, what does this mean about me? And eventually, I learned it doesn't mean anything about me. It's because, as we just said, I am still just one person with this combination of symptoms that affect my life in this particular way, and I still have to figure out how to learn and cope and adapt to all of those things. So. Yeah, it's been a very interesting journey, and I've done really well in certain jobs because of it, and I've done terrible in other jobs. I've learned a little bit more about what helps me be successful in certain roles, and also just in at certain points in time in my life, depending on what else is going on. All of those things, intersect and relate in some way. So.
Jonathan?
Mm. Um, and this is a juicy, like this is a charged one for me. It was simpler in high school. I mean, so I think my symptoms started around third grade, like really kicked in. I was really struggling through fifth and sixth grade. My grades were slipping. There was a discussion about holding me back a year. I did not end up doing that. Um, I was in junior high, and as my mom tells it, my social studies teacher came up to her and said, "Medicate your kid," which they're not supposed to do. But I wasn't wrong. And I remember when I got medicated for the first time, and I was like I was crying. I was like, I'm just one of those kids that's being medicated to handle my ADHD. Like, and we tried so many different things. Like we tried like, wheat and, like cut, just different things, supplements, whatever. Like we tried a bunch of different stuff. And oh my God, ADHD medication was such a godsend in terms of trying to like actually like getting me productive. It was single-handedly the thing that got me through the rest of high school, college. It made me very, very productive. It has downsides too. I mean, big things for it are, for me at least, appetite suppression. Had to deal with that one pretty significantly, and then also if you take it too late, sleep gets really fucked up. Excuse me. Um, um, but uh, yeah. Uh, uh, I have also even with medication and helping my ADHD, I've still seen how characteristics of it have really supported me and also really hindered me in my career. I'm really good at hyper-focusing on things that I'm interested in. You give me something that I'm not interested in, and I will have a really, really freaking hard time maintaining focus on that thing. And that has been to my detriment in certain roles where I'm really good if you give me like an open sort of playground and say, go do something that you're passionate about and make the world a better place. I can generally figure that out. When I've observed that when certain constraints start getting thrust upon me, or certain expectations, that tends to be more difficult unless the thing that I'm doing aligns with what I really want to do. Um, um, and this has made me really, really productive in times, right? Like I was really good at, I did a lot of DevOps stuff at one of the first companies I came out of college, and I loved to build, like, love doing CI/CD, develop, like, making build pipelines more performant, and I could, like, kick butt and make that stuff better. And I would struggle in, like, go write documentation sort of tasks. Um, and that has reared its ugly head subsequently in later places in my career. I've had managers that are really compassionate and supportive, and then I've had those managers move out from underneath me because of political shifts, and had that whole structure that was working really, really well for me just go out the window. Um, and so yeah, I know that there are things that I'd like to improve about myself, but I also have to acknowledge who I am. Like there's a duality of like both dually acknowledging myself and accepting myself for who I am, and also acknowledging that I can improve in certain areas with the right support out there. And that's the big thing, is making sure that you have managers and people in your life that are able to support you, and mentors that are able to support you. Yeah.
I love that last piece. Gave me a little warm fuzzies, goosebumps. Um, I'm I consider myself I'm not diagnosed, but I think I have ADHD. So I'm undiagnosed ADHD, and what both of you were saying was really resonating with me because I still remember one job I had. I had a coworker that would call me 20-minute squirrel. I didn't realize that my time limit was 20 minutes, but he was sitting next to me and he had a stopwatch. He brought a stopwatch one day to work, and lo and behold, 20 minutes, I'm on the computer, hyper focused. Hit that 20-minute mark, I was up, lollygagging around, talking to folks, and then next 20 minutes, I'm back down. Da, 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 da. So he did this over a course of weeks, and that's when I learned, like, okay, 15 to 25 minutes is usually my frame, but as you all were sharing the story, that that came up. So we really do find those niches for us. At the end, Jonathan, you mentioned very, very important. So I'm going to skip to one of our last questions, and it was, what does it look like to be an ally in neurodiversity? How can you help create an inclusive? I'm not sure who's sharing screen.
ADHD, highway to oh hey, look a squirrel. Yeah.
Squirrel. We had to, right? Um, Focus. I use that word a lot too, focus. What does it look like to be an ally in diversity? And then how can you or create an inclusive environment, something that's supportive and accommodating? Jonathan, we'll start with you and then pass it over to John.
Oh Lordy. I've seen it go really badly, so I can give some insights on that one, but I don't want to
Say the inversion.
I know the inversion.
Mm.
Um I've seen for me at least, there's a lot of stigma. I've struggled a lot with going through the official HR channels to ask for support, right? Like that's something that I always feel a bit of shame around. But that's also like supposed to be there to protect you and the company. Um, uh, and so I've spoken to some people who like because of their neurodivergency, they just work their ever-loving butts off in order to compensate. And it's on a certain side, it's like that is incredibly impressive. And on the other side, it's like, do you have a life? Right? Like, do you know, like everybody else gets to clock out at after 9 to 5. And because of your neurodivergency, in order to keep pace with the rest of the team, you've got to, you know, you can't do that. And I've struggled with that similarly in my life, and I don't know how to balance that. I just need to work harder in order to get the same thing done versus that I shouldn't need to work as hard and I should still be worthy of the salary that everybody else gets. And I don't know, I haven't figured out the right balance there because we are all being judged against that same bar. Um, and there is this balance of asking for help and just keeping your head down in the corporate world. And that sucks too. And I really like it grinds my gears so much that that's a reality because it just seems unfair. Um, I haven't yet figured out the right answer here. Um, I know some people just say, well, just start your own company so that you can, and then you run the ship and then it's not, then, you can't get fired. Yeah, I truly don't have the right answer. I've tried and I'm continuing to play with it and trying to figure out and maybe it's just finding the right job. There's a combination of trying to find the right job for yourself too. Yeah. John.
Yeah, I think those were good points. And I think so. I've been a manager as well as an IC. I think from a management standpoint, we've talked about the differences a little bit there. Being a manager that's a good human being is helpful across the board, right? And having empathy for people, being able to create environment with psychological safety, those are things that are like really going to contribute to supporting your entire team, but also people who are neurodivergent. I also like as a manager myself, I always thought of the your team is a collection of individuals. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses, regardless of whether they're neurodivergent or not. And I would, to get the most out of your team as this collection of people, you have to figure out how you can enable people to do the things that they're good at and they're best suited for, while still enabling growth opportunities and other stuff. Like sometimes you have to do things to get better that aren't things you're good at. But consistently asking people to do things are really hard is not like, irrespective of fairness, it's not a good way to get things done, right? Like I used to argue with my wife about why I cannot just make a list first thing in the morning of I'm going to get these 3 things done. She says, this is what I do every day I go to work. I make a list of these 3 things, I'm going to do them. And she said, why can't you do that? And I'm like, I'm not capable of explaining to you. Like, if I have this list of 3 things, I will stare at that list all day long, never doing any of the things on there. And I won't do anything else because I'll spend the entire time worrying about those 3 things. So that is the opposite of helpful to me. And so, you know, that's a thing that's hard for other people to understand. But if you just eventually she listened to me, right? And she understands that like I can't just keep asking you to do this. We need to find a different way to approach solving this problem. And I think for myself personally, that's been another really important realization of like so many times in life we're told how to do something in a neurotypical way. And instead of looking at a problem to solve, I did some ADHD coaching for a while, which was so amazing and helpful. It was super expensive, which is unfortunate because I was only able to take advantage of it because of my privilege. But the consistent questions that my coach asked were, you know, can you describe a time when you were actually successful doing this kind of work? And like, why were you successful doing that kind of work, and how did you solve that problem? So rather than saying, I'm terrible at writing documentation, I'm going to just sit down and write 500 words every day and just force myself to do it, like, that's not going to work. I talked about working late at night. That works really well for me. And so rather than saying I'm never going to work late at night, I'm going to allow myself to maybe take breaks during the day, just sleep in, to take a nap, to do something else, because I know I'm going to get my quote real work done late at night. And so as an ally, allowing people to operate that way, whether it's working remotely, working flexible time and hours, all that sort of stuff can make a big difference. And then I think the biggest part of the psychological safety is there is a certain amount of emotional reactivity as well that can come with ADHD. And when you ask someone about why they haven't done some work, you get an emotionally reactive response, usually driven. It's a fight or flight situation, right? Like, you asked me to do this thing, I haven't done it because it's a thing that's hard for me to do, rather than calmly sitting down and thinking, how can I solve this problem? When I have that conversation with people, I'm ready to like get up out of my desk chair and run out of the room. Like, I cannot think about anything else. And so when I can have open and honest conversations because of the psychological safety about that, it goes so much better. So yeah. Anyways, I will stop rambling at this point. I know as well too, Matt. We've had a lot of really great conversations about some of our experiences together too. So I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to chat about.
Yeah, if I'm allowed to jump in, if I'm not, kick me out. Yeah, there's a lot of pieces. So for my background with now what I call odd HD, if you haven't heard that term yet, which is kind of the autistic ADHD combination. I've had it since I was like one, or I've been diagnosed since I was one, like a baby, because of my mom was a resource teacher. So I have a very unique world growing up in it that I went through experiments. I was doing all these different trials and things because my mom had so many resources. Like in elementary in 1995, I had a keyboard that I could type all my notes because I couldn't write well. So I've had a lot of access to a lot of different things that have encouraged me to learn and give back over the years. And one, excuse me, and on the ally side that we're kind of hitting right now. So I have a couple different businesses, and one of them I actually teach this to companies. So I actually go in and coach and work with companies how to accommodate neurodivergent, how to hire, how to engage with, and a lot of people think it's really complicated. I think everyone on this call probably knows it's just empathy. Like that's really, to break it down to the smallest thing, is it's just teaching people to be like, cool, they have a different opinion. Just let it happen for a minute. See what happens and where that goes. But most people are so ingrained that if they don't share their side, like their perspective, then they're not going to get included. And so for a lot of people, it's really hard to have empathy for someone that's different because they've never had to think about it. They've always had to defend themselves and promote themselves. And I think, Jonathan, I don't know if you're hitting on this, but you made me think about this, of like in the corporate sector, it's very competitive. And so people don't want to sometimes admit that they have, and kind of self-report, and that ask for help can become a target. And so like on the ally side is really just ask questions. Like if you see someone, like John said, see someone work differently, just freaking let them work differently or ask them why. When I was a manager of a group, I would always send out like a 40 question survey to all these engineers because they don't like talking. And so I had to empathize with them. They don't, because I'm always I keep it working with engineers, which I don't know how, which are usually quieter than me. And so, but I found ways to engage. And it was later someone said, like, they'd never had that before. And I don't think they classified themselves as neurodivergent, but even on the other side, it was just the empathetic response of accommodating that someone will work differently, someone will think differently. I thought for a long time that, and it wasn't until, and so the way I do this in my life is to kind of is I do it with humor. I don't know if John's seen me do this before, but like there's occasion like 2015, I was at a table and this group of literal rocket engineers working for the Navy at the time, and they were literally designing the rockets to go to Mars. So like actually like so freaking they all got like at least 7 PhDs each. Um, and for me, I I asked a question and everyone was quiet. And my neurodivergent brain, even still, I have to remind myself daily that if you're quiet, that doesn't mean you're mad at me. I always think that if you're quiet, you're pissed. And John's helped me learn that too. I'm like, no, it's just sometimes people just need to think. And I don't think, I talk. I think by talking. And I couldn't for the longest my entire life fathom how you can't, how you think differently. I still can't. And I never will. I have empathy to everyone thinks differently, but I'll start rambling too. But yeah, I think I'll just go back to empathy. Like anyone that's trying to work with anyone on either side, because I also get really pissed when people try to use ADHD as an excuse. Because I've experienced it my entire life, had ups and downs from it. And so on both sides, empathy from whether you have it and people don't understand you, that's okay. They just don't understand you, and vice versa. If you do think like kind of the regular corporate way, then just maybe someone doesn't let them a chance.
I think the only thing that I want to add was something that popped in my head while I was listening to both of you. One of the things that I've struggled with is holding myself to the expectations of what I can see other people able to do. Right? I've kicked myself frequently for like I'll see that like so and so can do XYZ thing in such and such a way, and I'm like, why can't I do it that way? And that one, having empathy for yourself is really important and really hard, because you look at it, yeah, just comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy, and comparison is the thief of your own. Yeah, it can get in your own way.
That's a powerful statement. It is. If anybody would like to chime in, share their insight, ask questions, feel free to just raise your hand and do it. I don't know when my calendar is deciding to send me all my meetings from the last 2 days and distract me. We'll go on with the next question. So many noises. What challenges have you faced? I know we touched on this briefly in some of the conversations and some of the stuff that was shared, but just what challenges have you seen neurodiverse folks face from yourself or just others throughout your career or just in life in general? We'll jump over to John.
Yeah, I think one of the patterns, and this is really common as a parent, I think about this more often with kids who have neurodiversity, which is the negative feedback and the frequency with which you're told to stop doing something or do something a different way, or you're not doing it right. Like that leads to like essentially the shame that we're talking about, right? Like feeling bad about not being like other people. And that is a thing that stays with you for so long. And it's so hard to break out of. And I think that whether it's deadlines at work or the frequency, the expectations about how you are supposed to work, like all of that like reinforces, recreates situations with that negative feedback. And if you're dealing with people who don't have, the empathy or the awareness to be able to kind of stop and take a second and ask questions about what's really going on, I think that's where I think a lot of folks have the most struggles. And uh, the I think that, for me, and it's funny that Matt mentioned not talking. Like for me, one of the things that I realized is, a lot of folks with ADHD have a less working memory, like a very technical sort of thing, right? Like if we were to play a game listing out letters in the alphabet and you asked me to recall them afterwards, I would do terrible. But as we like translate this into like an engineering thing, solving a problem, how do I actually go about trying to communicate and convey my thoughts about solving the problem? I will think about it forever in my head. And I will constantly confuse myself. I will keep forgetting where I started somewhere from the middle or the beginning and never make it to the end. And when I talk to people about it, though, I do the same sort of thing, but eventually a structure starts coming out of it. And then I can build this contextual awareness for how I went about describing solving this problem that's easier for me to remember because I can follow that structure, that context, and then never actually remember all of the details, but rediscover them. Right. So like kind of go through then and have a more consistent thought process. And I've worked on a couple of white papers and other things like that. And I've never been able to sit down and just type and write stuff out. But if I have a conversation with somebody and tell them what I want to write and then capture an outline and the details of it inside of that, it becomes much, much easier for me to do. So if you tell me, tying this back to struggles or difficulties, a lot of times in open source, especially, there's a big push towards doing work asynchronously or other things like that. Like that can be a real struggle for me, not to have a person to be able to talk to, not to have that opportunity to collaborate on things. At the same time, it's a struggle to have a meeting and get interrupted because so it's always so hard to kind of to balance these things out. But yeah.
I've had my I've had a really interesting career. Some of my most productive moments have been when I've had interns. I've kicked butt, written lots of code, um, uh, gotten lots of stuff done. I've had the opportunity to speak at, industry-wide security conferences, Black Hat, DEF CON. Um, have been an open source maintainer. I've become a GitHub star, GitHub security, I was a GitHub security master for a while. I had found some of the highest number of CVEs on GitHub security advisory for a long time. So I have done a lot of really impactful, positive work in the world. And at the same time, I've been on a performance plan twice in my career. I've been laid off twice. Um, I have been managed out once by a manager. Um, I have struggled with ADHD and long form writing. Um, I I am not. I am simultaneously a person that's done impactful things in the industry and done great things, and someone that struggled. And these dualities both exist within me. Um, uh, and I don't, I continue to, it's a real, I think the big challenge is to not get overly attached to the big positive things that you do in the career. Like, don't get an overly inflated ego, and don't beat yourself up too much when shit goes poorly, right? Because I've had a non-traditional, non-linear career, and that's okay, right? Currently unemployed. Currently, I'm doing the best with it. I just got laid off from my job at Chain Guard. and on their security lab team, they dissolved the security lab, and I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do? And I'm skiing in Colorado. I've been skiing since December, and I'm just having a blast with it. So, and I don't have a job, and I'm like, okay, well, we'll figure out what the next thing is. I have no idea what's gonna happen next. Um, I think the biggest thing is, um, when you struggle, when you have difficulties, when you have adversity, don't take it personally, but do take it as an opportunity to learn. That's one of the things that I'm trying to do is like, okay, I acknowledge that this is an area that I'm potentially weak. Go reach out to your mentors and be like, hey, this is an area that I'm weak. What do I need to do or learn in order to fill this gap? That's kind of, um, what have I seen? Like generally people in neurodivergency, people like the problems people face, difficulties asking for help. Challenges asking for help is a really big thing. There's a giant fear that generally exists around I'm struggling and I have to struggle alone because God forbid I actually speak my truth. I might lose this job or, you know, I mean, I've worked at companies where the your manager may be empathetic, but the organization as a whole is not empathetic to you and your neurodiversity, and so they will chew you up and spit you out. Um, and yeah, um, if you can't necessarily trust your company, that sucks, right? That sucks entirely. Can you find that in mentors, or do you need to find another job? And that acceptance of this role is not the right one for me. I need to go find something else is hard, especially because you're holding on until you can find that other role sometimes, right? Yeah. Or you're waiting to get laid off because then you can get a severance agreement. I know. Different games. Different games. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Jonathan, because I think a lot of people can't understand that most neurodivergent people can't separate work and home and personal. And I know I'll speak, I can't speak for anyone else, but I can't, like for me, it's really hard to give passion to something that Jonathan, as you're hitting, that conflicts or that goes against that causes all things. Like it's hard for me to work without passion. Like I'm an emotional being. Everything about me is included in everything. I can't separate. And I have a really good friend that can. And I always try to ask them, like, how do you? And they don't know. They at 4 o'clock they stop working and they just walk out the door and go home. I was like, that kind of sounds amazing and terrifying at the same time. So I really like what you're saying there, Jonathan, because it's not a perfect world. I mean, I've taught this to companies from in the government to I've actually worked on the ADA, American Disabilities Act, with Richard Pimentel and helped make some changes there towards neurodivergency. But it's still just a faux pas in the workplace. So I love that this conversation's happening. And even now with this all the DEI stuff that's coming out and changing. I hope that it affects this, not to get political, but it affects this. And so I hope these groups, even official or unofficial, still exist so we can all learn from each other.
Mental number keeping, right?
Oh,
I do this all the time where you're like, I haven't been productive the first half of my day, so I have to work, 8 hours this evening, right? That like internal, like I've been so unproductive the morning, I missed like the 9 to 12, right? That means that I've got to make that 3 hours, 5 hours up on the tail end of my day, and that's going to interfere with my life with my family or whatever like that. Like that, I do that all the freaking time, and it sucks.
Yeah, I can resonate with that because I'm one of those where I just like, especially if I'm hyper focused on a task, like I just want to finish the task before I leave. But so I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and class starts at 6 and it ends at this time. So I think I like the sport because it makes my brain shut off. But the minute I'm off the mat driving back home, it's like back on that problem, like da 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 da. It's clear now. So all the gunk is out, the garbage collector came by, but it's still kind of like passing through. And I don't know who mentioned, but I remember as a child, I I struggled with reading. I struggled with language. It's still kind of seeing. So I'm undiagnosed WebMD dyslexic, I think. Um, Nothing's credited, but when I was a child, we would do the FCAT, so the Florida Standard or whatnot. And my math scores were like always top tier. They wanted to put me in the special like smart people classes, but my reading score was always like very, very low. So you can give me a math problem, an equation, I can solve it. You give me a math problem that was in a paragraph, I struggled. And I'm not sure who said what, but that reminded me of that, where I was just like, I can solve my problems if they are one, two, threes or X, Y's. You can give me all the calculus problems, I'll solve it. Give me a word problem, it's game over. It's just game over. Um, we are at the tail end of our chat. It's been a very good, interesting. The next one is just advantages of including teams on work, but I did want to open it up if anybody has any questions or any insights that they want to include. If not, we'll jump over to the advantages of working that you've seen in working on teams and include. I hear someone getting off mic.
It was me. Hi everybody, I'm Katie Palmer. I work at GitHub. I'm on the safety and integrity team. And Jonathan, what you were saying about wasting time and then feeling like you've got to, work all night to catch up. And I am not from a computer background, and this is something I've really struggled with. I hate computers. They're not my thing. And working at GitHub, and God forbid telling somebody that you don't like computers, because my brain is very out of sight, out of mind. I have big dual monitors and I still like the minute something's gone, it's gone. It's dead to me. And so, for me, like, we went to an offsite with a 40-foot long whiteboard, and it was like the best work day of my life because I just started at one end and went to the other end, and it was amazing. And I feel like this is the first job I've had where I haven't really had like a quota to meet. And they want me to do creative thinking, and they trust that I will do it. And I mean, I've been there for 5.5 years. Like, they know what they got by now. They know how I am. And it's like I still really struggle with this idea that they're just gonna like let me do stuff. And also that, most of my best ideas come at 3 o'clock in the morning when I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, this is what we need to do. And I think my coworkers have gotten good about turning off their notifications. If they haven't by now, that's on them. Like, you can just turn that shit off. You don't have to know that I'm pinging you at 3 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, I'm 43 and I was diagnosed 5 years ago. And just this experience of finding my people, because I think about half of the people at GitHub are neurodivergent, even if they're not all diagnosed. And being in a place for the first time where the place is full of these incredibly bright people who failed out of college 3 times and, this, that, and the other. And it's been incredible. But at the same time, yeah, that like, I have to be able to prove that I'm contributing, despite the fact that obviously I'm contributing or they would have fired me. It's just, it's a definite vibe.
Thank you. That was loved it. Yeah. Naps. Anyone else want to share? We're at the end, so we'll just open up the floor to anybody want to share any insights or gems they want to drop before.
Yeah, I think the advantages side is the and like literally anything is possible. There is no roadblock when it comes to somebody with neurodivergence. You talked about dyslexia. Also, not self-diagnosed, diagnosed by like 7 different people. But my version of dyslexia is so a lot of people see words or images, and my version of dyslexia is where I see actually a 3D image. And so that's why I actually get things backwards, is because when you're talking, I create a story in my head, and I could be looking at it from this perspective or this perspective of that 3D image I've created, which is difficult in 80% of situations. And that's why I've created companies and created ways to become a problem solver, because it's fantastic. It makes people fantastic at problem solving. And dyslexia is an awesome advantage for people that are trying to look at things differently. It's just a lot of people aren't taught that, and they don't understand how their own brain works. And so that's why I always encourage people too, is like, learn. You don't, there's not a, like, stop trying to identify with a certain word or diagnosis, or just think about how you operate. And that's how you operate, and that's how your brain works. And find there's going to be disadvantages and there's going to be advantages, just like with anything. I'm just trying to find those. The first time I stopped taking pills was I was 16, when I met this doctor, and he taught me like Michael Jordan, Leonardo da Vinci, and that's when I started like really going into like the, oh wow, like all these people, they're it's the way to go. So that's the advantages are unlimited when it comes to this kind of stuff, because literally there's no roadblocks.
Yeah, it's just interesting. My brain.
And I know, Jonathan mentioned kind of about work and having different jobs, different careers, the different possible exits from jobs. And I've experienced a few of those as well. And I'm fortunate enough to have enough experience, I suppose, and enough opportunities ahead of me that to try and emotionally disconnect from some of that, because there are places I've worked at where I've suffered sufficient emotional trauma from working there that continuing to work there is not a realistic possibility. Like whether it's you end up on a PIP, or you get laid off, or managed out, like you have to make a change, and it can be scary and it can be hard. But it doesn't, like, it's only good or bad if you let it be. And if you think about what the future opportunity beholds. As Matt said, like anything is possible. There's a great article as well out there in more general sense of like, this is not the job you'll retire from. Like the days of any of us working for the same company for 40 years and retiring, it doesn't exist anymore. So wherever you're working now, unless you're a year or two away from retirement, like it's probably not the job that you're going to retire. Like there's going to be that change at some point in time, and so it's inevitable, and it's okay to accept that and hopefully make the best of it. So
All
I like
right.
the phrase that I it's kind of maybe problematic, but it also holds a ring of truth to it, which is as a Google engineer, I think said in a blog post somewhere, um, I do the next right thing and I wait to get fired. If I get fired, if I don't get fired, I did the right thing. If I got fired, I probably was at the wrong company. Um, and yeah, I think that you can make mistakes, and but also like it's a solid sort of mindset, and that's like it's something that I've lost sight of when I've been really struggling, when I've been beating myself up, when I've been in a really hard place in a career play in my career. But at the end of the day, I really do try to do my best wherever I am, wherever I work. Um, you know, um, I try to have my own best interests and the best interests of the people that I care about in mind when I do this work, and uh, keep the end user in mind when thinking about security research. Um, yeah, um, careers are weird, and I don't think that careers are weird. Mine's been nonlinear, and I'm okay with that. And I'm just I'm trying to go with the flow. I know that that's not always going to be possible. I know there's going to be hard times, but yeah, just try to go with the flow, and learn, ask questions, have mentors in your life. I've really appreciated having my mentors in my life that I can say, hey, what the hell, what do I do here? Is this a bad idea? Should I do this? Should I not do this? Yeah.
That is one thing I'm grateful to Christopher and Yesenia and some of you guys about.
Yeah. Yeah, Crow's been helpful.
Having
People,
having mentors really help a lot. And I think one person I haven't mentioned is Avishai. A lot of times I see we were working on scorecard and he he has to give me a lot of direction and I struggle focusing on working on the project, and yeah, but he's a really great mentor, so that helps a lot. Yeah, so
Yeah. Mentors and a support group. You know, I call it my tribe, which is just includes everybody that's there. And I can vouch for Jonathan, who really goes above and beyond for the good intentions of others and folks. We are at the top of the hour, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I want to thank everyone that's been on the call, joining, sharing your vulnerability, sharing your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and it's just been absolutely amazing. This will be on the interwebs on YouTube, and once it's up and out, I'll share it on the DEI channel, or I think Ops shares it on the DEI channel, and then we blast it on if you want, let us know. But thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday? Thursday.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.